Welcome inside a non-live edition of the Scores Table. Brian Hench and Danny Rago, Josh Sable, Courtney Delks here with you. We're going to split our preview shows this week up into two parts. We're going to do today the Class A, 2A, 3A, and then tomorrow, Thursday or Wednesday, as you're watching this, will be Class 4A. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and touch on every matchup, at least shout out some leading scorers, some players to watch, and then we'll take some deep dive. I know Danny's been studying some film. Josh and Courtney as well, just from experience from their days playing and getting familiarized with some of these towns. So we'll start with Class A, move down to 4A, and as always, you can check out the show description for chapters and can jump ahead as you'd like and then find specific matchups. We'll start with Marquette Catholic against Morgan Township. Marquette Catholic comes in 21-4, Morgan Township 17-7. I'll address Marquette Catholic averages about 55 points a game, which I've realized as I go through some of these Class A teams who I'm not as familiar with. That's a pretty good scoring offense there, and they're young. That's something that jumped out to me as I was looking at them. They're led in scoring by a sophomore, Lania Davis, at 19 a game. She's a 49% shooter. And you have a freshman right behind her, Marissa Pleasant, averaging over 10 points a game. And then I had Natalie Robinson marked down as well. And then on the other side, Morgan Township's a little bit lower scoring team, but you have Peyton Honcher, a senior, pouring in 13 a game, 7 rebounds, and 2 steals. And then Maddie Lemons and Josie Lemons, they're both juniors at 10 points a game. So an interesting game there. Looking at John Harrell, he has that about a 9-point spread between those two teams. So winner from that will move into the semi-state draw. It would be nice if we could pick out hey, here's where they're going, here's who they're playing, but we can't spin it that far ahead yet because we have another random draw. Our first big stop of the day is Bethany Christian, 18-6 at Caston, 21-3. That's the primetime game on Saturday. Bethany Christian last year, as you guys might remember, went on this crazy run from sectionals all the way through to their first ever state championship game appearance. I think in the process, they won like 2 or 3 buzzer beaters in a row. Just a crazy, crazy story. Zoe Williams for them is one to watch. She's averaging 21 a game and 5 assists and 5 steals. She had 29 last week in the sectional final. And something cool with Bethany Christian and what they're doing this year, they're donating $300 in a scholarship in a player's name to a school in Cambodia that teaches English. And the money goes to girls in the community, teaching them how to learn English. They get them school supplies, and they're buying a bicycle for them, which is often the only mode of transportation for those kids. So a really cool thing that Bethany Christian is doing this year. You can read more about that from the South Bend Tribune. Austin did a great job writing about them earlier this year. Danny, I'll toss to you because you've done a little bit of research on Bethany Christian, right?
The Bethesda Christian, actually. Sorry, Bethany Christian.
No, that's my fault. I set Danny up for failure there. That's on me. Another player, too, because I followed Bethany Christian kind of loosely this year. Maria Stolfus is averaging 12 a game, 4 assists, 4 steals. She had 24 points in the sectional final. So everything for Bethany Christian kind of runs through Williams and Stolfus. A good team, they're the underdogs on Saturday against Caston, who has their own standout, and Isabel Scales, who's averaging 16 a game, and then Addison Zippelman at 14. So, but again, I think the experience factor, especially this time of year, and Josh and Courtney, you two can probably talk to this better than anybody, just the importance of experience this time of year and how that can swing a matchup, especially for an underdog who's been here and done it as recently as a year ago.
Yeah, I think when you've been here before, exactly what to expect, especially logistics. Because I remember when we first went to the regionals back in 21. I didn't realize that you have regional meetings where you're talking about okay, this is the hotel you're staying at, or these are the officials. And when you get to the school, this is where you're going to go. You don't factor that into your weekly routine. You just think that you're going to practice and carry on like you normally do. And then you have to pick a day to go practice at that facility. So that kind of throws a wrench in your plans a little bit. So I definitely give the advantage to teams that have been there because the coaches know logistically that they're going to have a great week, no surprises. But if you're that first team, it's awesome. You're going to regionals for the first time, but it can throw you off your routine a little bit. And we all know how coaches and players like structure, and they don't want to do anything different that they've done all season long.
What's this time of year look like for a player, Courtney?
In terms of a player, you just have to put complete trust into your coaches and your coaching staff that they're doing the best that they can to get all these things like Josh is talking about. It's going on the backside to make sure that they're putting you as a player and your team in the best position to win. So trusting those your coaches, as well as like not trying to do anything different. Don't like if you're not, now's not the time to go get in condition as a player. Like if you're not in condition, you're not going to get in condition. And so really just keeping yourself fresh, getting good sleep. It's the time of year where the weather's changing all crazy. You can get sick. So stay fresh, hydrate, all those little things that your mom tells you to do. Those are the things you got to be doing as a player at this time.
One other player, too, before we move on from Caston to mention, they have a freshman, Madison Douglas, is averaging 10 a game, 3 assists, and 4 steals. So a very well-rounded lineup there for Caston with a blend there of upperclassmen and then a freshman coming in to make a difference. Daleville, as we move on here, 9-13. Daleville sneaks in against Union City, which is 13-12. Daleville, I remember seeing the highlight Saturday night, and it just didn't quite register with everything going on, but really dramatic win in the final seconds for Anderson Prep. I saw Rob Hunt, friend of the show, tweet out a photo. The player who hit it is still out celebrating, so that's pretty cool. Good for her. She looked like she was having a good time, and they still had the score up on the scoreboard from that sectional championship game, which is also a pretty neat thing. I mean, why not celebrate it when you win a game like that to move on to regionals? For Daleville, Addie Gothrop and Isabel Williams are both averaging around 13 a game. And on the other side, Union City, they lost to Tri 70-41 during the regular season, came back to win 49-45 on Saturday. Luann Schoenbrut has 17 a game, 10 rebounds. She's good for double-double. And then defensively, too, 5 steals a game while also dishing out 3 assists. So really well-rounded talent there for Union City. As I swing back here on
just a side note on Union City. So I actually didn't realize Union City had advanced. I think Union City is called Union City because half of it is in Indiana and the other half of it is in Ohio. So when you go to Union City, because I think we do daylight savings times in Indiana a little bit differently, like you'll walk into the diners and you'll walk into the bank and you'll walk into the post office, and there's actually 2 clocks with a line with an Indiana clock on one side and an Ohio clock on the other side. So go Union City, because I think that's awesome.
Cool. That is wild. Holy smokes. I didn't know that. Emma Voss, by the way, was the hero from Saturday night. She hit the game winner in the final seconds there to lift Daleville to their sectional title. Looks like Rob is going to have more on that in the coming days. Northfield, 12-12 against Clinton Central, 23-1 as we keep moving along here. Sarah Parkinson for Clinton Central's at over 17 a game. Carly Davidson, 13 a game. And then Erica Robbins, 11 a game. And looking through all these Class A teams earlier today, especially on the north side, it seems like Clinton Central, has one of the more well-balanced and potent offenses among the qualifiers. And then Northfield, 14 points a game, 11 rebounds a game from Hannah Holmes, and Ellie Baker averages 13 points a game.
So I had a question for Courtney. Like, we're starting to the Union City, story kind of leads me to this question, but you're getting these Class A schools and these Class 2A schools that are now going to play in bigger gyms. In Oak Hill, if I remember right, you guys actually don't have that small of a gym, but it is very intimate. It seems like the people are right on top of you. I think there's a big wall behind one of them when you were at Oak Hill, which was a 2A school. But is this a big adjustment for some of these, jump shooting basketball teams to go into a bigger building? Is that a huge adjustment, Courtney?
I think it depends if the kid is playing, if they play travel basketball or not. If they're playing on a travel circuit where you're playing in these gyms that you have to just adjust no matter where you're at. But if you're an A or 2A player who just plays high school basketball only, and that's all you're used to being in, like there's going to be that sense of adjustment that you have to make. But most of these 1A, 2A kids, I mean, they're probably out shooting in their driveway and learning how to shoot in the wind and have the field in the background. So it's probably not that big of an adjustment. But yes, it depends on how much experience the kid has outside of just playing high school basketball. I think they're more well-rounded if you play other places throughout the spring and summer.
Yeah, and I'll just add from like a coaching standpoint, like these are the games. Like if I'm Clinton Central, and I'm 23-1, and I'm playing against Northfield, who's 12-12, and I think the spread's like 24 or something like that. Like as a coach, these are the games that make me the most nervous. It's not the games where it's supposed to be an even matchup or maybe you're an underdog. It's the games where you're supposed to be the heavy favorite and you're supposed to go in and win by 24. Those are the games that I hated coaching in the most because, like, what if you come out and you play a tight first quarter? or what if like your best player like picks up 2 fouls right away, or what if they throw like a junk defense or something at you? Like it's one of those games where, if you're Northfield, you have nothing to lose. And if you're Clinton Central, you're the heavy favorite, and you really just want to get in there and just like blow them out early. Don't even let them think they got a chance at it. But if you're Northfield, if you can keep it close, now all of a sudden, maybe you might have something there in the second half.
A thing on Northfield. So Northfield is just down the road from us. I don't know how many of their volleyball kids play basketball, but they just won the state championship in volleyball. So you might have some seniors on that team that volleyball is their main sport, but they're playing basketball, that they might, carry that confidence over. You just like you said, Josh, those are the games that it's against those teams. You just never know.
Put those girls on top of a press and use that length and athleticism. Let's get a million deflections and let's go. Who knows?
Right.
And if you saw the story, the head coach at TCU is a guy by the name of Mark Campbell, who's actually famous in college basketball for recruiting Sabrina Ionescu to Oregon. They had injuries when he took the TCU job, had open tryouts, and 3 girls on the volleyball team all made the team and all got in the game for a division. I mean, I'm a big proponent of like multi-sport athletes. I thought that was one of the coolest girls basketball stories of the year.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I hadn't heard that. First Central Indiana team from Class A, Eminence gets in 19-7. They had the tricky game at the beginning of sectionals against Lutheran. They handled their business there. Now they get Jac-Cen-Del 20-5. I remember when I first moved here, my first year, the snow pushed everything back, so I was able to go to a Class A game, and I saw Waldron versus Jac-Cen-Del. Waldron was really a special team that year, but I didn't realize just how much of a perennial power Jac-Cen-Del is usually at that Class A level. And Waldron pulled it off, the upset. Then I think that game went into overtime, if memory serves. It was wild. It did. It went into overtime, and just a crazy amount went into it for Waldron. Just a really special group there. But Jac-Cen-Del is back, and they are just such an experienced team. Julia Myers averaging 15 and 8. Reagan Hughes at 12 and 2 steals a game, and then Kelsey Borgman rounds it out at 10 points a game and 4 rebounds per game. So Eminence is certainly going to have their work cut out for them, but they have some good pieces too, and some players that if they can get hot, maybe keep the score a little bit lower, maybe they can pull it off. Sophia Osterman, Natalie Hubbard, and Danica Myers are their big 3 that you need to focus on with Eminence. But a team that, like we were just talking about, is coming in playing with house money, and just kind of rolling the dice out there and seeing what can happen.
Yeah, Scott Smith, he's a legend. He's won like 400 plus games. Like, this guy has been to more regionals and semi-states and state championships almost more than any other coach. So, he's definitely, like you said, experienced, and he's going to have his team ready to play.
Absolutely. Now is the one that we're ready to pause on. North Central Farmersburg 17-10 against Bethesda Christian 18-5. I'll start the conversation here with this. Kenzie Fulks is fully healthy coming in this year. The regional, she was coming off a knee injury, I think it was last year, going into sectional. She made it back in time for her junior year to finish out her junior year. But this year she's healthy, averaging 20 points a game. And she also has Sydney Gooden, another senior, Jayla Ferguson, another senior, and Leah Heim, another senior, all with her. So a veteran core there for Bethesda Christian looking to get over the hump against North Central. Yeah,
Gooden, she provides that kind of third senior that gives them some scoring balance. Jayla Ferguson provides paint occupancy. On the defensive side, she's pulling down over 7 boards a game, but Bethesda Christian's identity is Kenzie Fulks. And there's a lot of people who might think that Kenzie Fulks is the best player in Class A. So this is the one that you turn on. This is why I watched them on film. I wanted to see Kenzie Fulks and her maturation. I've seen her on, I've known who she is forever and ever. But this kid can get buckets. I mean, almost 20 points a game. I mean, she's also dealing out 5 assists, but she's hitting threes. She's creating for her teammate. She's got a tight handle. In the sectional championship game, there was also a play where she dribbled out like 20 seconds of the shot clock, got a high ball screen, got doubled, just kind of dragged it out and reattacked it. Like, this is a really, really good basketball player, and it sets up for a really good matchup when we get into North Central Farmersburg. Where we talk about kind of the matchup, but Bethesda Christian and Kenzie Fulks is one of the kind of attractive watches and one of the attractive streams because she is really good.
Bethesda Christian has moved out. This is their 5th straight year moving out of sectional, and they've lost in regionals, in the regional semifinals, championship game, semifinal, or last year was just the 1-game regional. But this run began with a loss to North Central Farmersburg by 3 in 2020 in the regional championship game back when we were under that format of 2 games. But yeah, echoing what Danny said, I saw Kenzie her freshman or sophomore year when I moved out here, and when watching her shoot, and I followed her career ever since. I mean, she's a special talent, a fun player, and I think Danny, you and I were on one of our post-game live shows when she hit that crazy buzzer beater, like an off-balance 3 to win it. That was pretty awesome. So
yeah,
really fun kid. If you're down there, I think they're paired up with the Indian Creek Chittard game.
I think she's going to IU South Bend too. I think she's committed. She's a senior. So she's going to play some college basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great for her. So if you're out there, I think I forget where they're at, but Greencastle, I think. So if you're over there, might as well just stay for the second game because it'll be a good one. Shifting it ahead now to North Central Farmersburg, like Danny mentioned, Jalyn Davidson, 18 points a game for them, plus six rebounds. I'm assuming 3 steals. Then you also have Shelby C at 13 a game, 4 assists, 4 steals, and they're averaging 14 assists a game. That North Central team.
Yeah, in the limited film that I watched, both North Central Farmersburg and Bethesda Christian both played man-to-man. So Jalyn Davidson, who's a year younger than Fulks, but this sets up to be an unbelievably entertaining matchup between 2 playmaking guards that can both get downhill and finish at the rim, especially Davidson. In the aluminum, it's just when you have 2 guards like this, and they match up against each other, it brings all of the intricacies into play. Where do the doubles come from? Who's in foul trouble? What are the secondary defenses? But this one does set up that if it is Fulks versus Davidson, this is going to carry really 4A interest in watching those 2 kids match up.
That'll be really fun. Really fun. The next game involves the favorite, I think, in Class A. I overlooked Lanesville for whatever reason. I wrote it during the previous 4 sectionals, but then after sectionals, I just sort of forgot about them. But they are a clear-cut favorite in Class A. The defending state champion Lanesville comes in at 25-1, and they're taking on Barr-Reeve at 13-12 here in the regional. Lanesville's so good. Hadley Crosier is probably the best place to start. 15 points a game, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and 4 steals. And Danny and Josh, I think I texted you guys coming in that if she wins them another state championship, I mean, she could be in that Miss Basketball conversation similar to like an Amber Treader at 2A last year, where she went back-to-back. She did her junior and senior and was a finalist. And now, looking at Hadley, she could certainly be in that conversation with her resume.
Well, sorry, we're just now talking about Lanesville, but they're probably the odds-on favorite right now to win Class A. All due respect to the other 15 teams that are still alive, but this is Lanesville's show. They just got rid of Borden, and I streamed that game. I watched that game, and I felt like I was watching like Terhune versus Hickory. Like there are 2,000 people there. It was a small gym. It was elbow to elbow, but Lanesville is a defensive juggernaut. Like this team loves to extend pressure. They love to mix up looks. They played like an extended like Amoeba-like kind of matchup zone. And so I talked about how they like to change up pressure. For example, without changing zones, sometimes they trap the corners, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they show you an odd look front. Sometimes they show you an even look front. Sometimes they'll travel with a cutter. Sometimes they won't. Like that's an impossible concept to really prepare for. And they hang their hat on the defensive side of the floor, like 31 points per game. They force 14 turnovers per game, and they're only turning it over themselves 6 times. So, Josh, I say those things, and you probably love them, but they gave Riley Rarick and Ava Wheeler, they gave these kids fits. And these are 2 kids that project as Division I talents at Borden. And that game was, I don't want to say it was easy because it wasn't, but Rarick and Wheeler had every intention of going in there and making that a basketball game where they could upset Lanesville, and it just didn't happen. So, Josh, my question for you is when you have kind of these like amoeba-like zones without consistent rules to them, like how are you preparing for something like that? Or is that just a flow instinctual thing that you have to put on the players?
Yeah, I think, obviously you're going to give your players a structure to play out of, whether it's like a continuity zone press break, or, maybe there's like certain things you can do to get like, some mismatches. I always like to have, if we're being pressured, I always like to have like a small ball 5 out there. And then, cause usually, most bigs don't like to guard in space like that. So if you can put like a mobile 5 or 4 or 5 on their 4 or 5, then you have an advantage there. But like you said, when you're changing fronts and you're changing your pickup points, and sometimes you're going with cutter, sometimes you're not, it definitely like keeps you on your toes because you can't really scout for it really, and it makes it very, very, very challenging. And you can tell by their record and by their Sagarin that, it looks like on paper that they are clearly the class of 1A. But as we know, that's why you play the game. So, we'll see what happens on Saturday. Maybe Barr-Reeve will have something, up their sleeve, but Lanesville definitely the clear favorite.
Yeah, when I look at Lanesville, just looking at them against Class 1A schools, there's been a few close ones, but they're just putting it to the metal on people. And their only losses came to 3A Evansville Memorial December 29th in a tournament. They lost by 13 in that game. But their head coach, Angie Hinton, she's been at the school for 6 years. She's been coaching for 18 years. She knows what she's doing.
Well, they're well coached, but they also have really good players too. I mean, like Ava Kerr and Jane Davis. They have a post player by the name of Shelby Allen, who isn't even in their starting lineup. I guess that, the telecast said that she was averaging like 15 points per game in the tournament. Hilton Brumley in the Borden game, I think she hit maybe 3 first half threes. But Hank is right. Like Hadley Crosier, the guard in 2025 is averaging 15 points per game. She's also shooting 47% from the field. She's dealing out 5 assists. Like this kid is an absolute blur. And she's really active defensively. Like she's the point in the catalyst of all of those kind of weird fronts, Josh, that I was talking about. Like it's almost like she can do what she wants on the defensive side. She got a ton of respect from Borden too on the offensive side because the matchup that she got on the defensive side was Ava Wheeler, who is one of their better on ball defenders. But, she draws charges, she talks, she claps, she dives on the floor. She's really seems to be kind of the battery that charges that whole kind of Lanesville operation. And you really not need watch more than the first 60 seconds of the second half of the sectional championship game. I'm not making this up. She had a steal. She initiated her foul, which actually was Ava Wheeler's 3rd foul of the game. She picks up a 2nd foul. She finishes a layup, and then she gets a 3rd steal. Like that's all in the first 60 seconds of the half. Like this kid, if they win the state championship, Hank's right. Like it is very Amber Treader-like, but she's a baller. And Lanesville is a juggernaut. And one of the reasons why is because of Hadley Crosier.
And the thing too with Lanesville is that they're playing a pretty tough schedule. Like Courtney mentioned the Evansville Memorial game, and that was a 13-point game, but they've also beaten 4A Floyd Central. They've gone out, they've beaten Scottsburg, who's a solid 3A team. Like they go out and they play some teams, 2A Providence. So interested to see how you stack it moving forward, because you're going to have a pretty veteran group again next year. How do you stack the schedule? But I mean, if she does that, she's going to have a really good resume in terms of games won. And Josh talks a lot about body of work, and I remember her going off last year in the state championship game. So
yeah, and Hank, you hinted on it. Like if you look at their Sagarin score and you look at their ranking, like I think they're like 31st in the state. So it's not just like they're not just like a good 1A school. Like they're good in the entire state of Indiana. And like you said, like if you're going for a Miss Basketball, like that type of award, like those things definitely matter.
Just watching that film you put up, Hank, the 2 things that stood out to me right away, they look strong, they look athletic, and they look like they have great team chemistry. And team chemistry at this time of the year when you're going on a tournament run has to be there, and it'll show on the court. And just watching that, like I can tell that I don't know any of them, but I'm pretty sure that by that they got some good team chemistry at Lanesville.
And I think Hadley Crosier also is verbally committed to go to IU South Bend. So she would be Kenzie Fulks' teammate.
Wow.
Yeah. Good luck scoring against them.
Yeah.
And then one quick note, Shelby Allen missed the first half of the season with, I'm assuming, an injury, but looking at her Max Preps page earlier today, it looked like she missed the first chunk of the year. So maybe that explains why she's coming off the bench. Just settling people into the rotation, maybe. But then on the other side, Barr-Reeve, they have Hannah Bledsoe, 11 points a game, 9 rebounds, 3 blocks per game. Barr-Reeve, 13-12 on the season. Yeah, I mean, like you said, this time of year it'd be foolish to write anybody off. But Barr-Reeve, if they were to knock off Lanesville, that would constitute quite the upset there.
Yeah.
on that one. Trinity Lutheran, as we move on. Trinity Lutheran 14-11 against Wood Memorial 15-10. For Trinity Lutheran, their leading scorer, Madison Keith, hasn't played since early January. It's a tough loss for them, but a freshman, Marley Warren, has been stepping up and playing really well. She's averaging 14 a game alongside senior Lisa Fredge at 12 points a game and 2 steals. Jordan Brewer rounds them out with 9 points a game. On the other side, Wood Memorial, I wasn't able to find any stats on them, but they repeated as sectional champs. And reading the game story from their paper, it seems like things kind of run through Josie Page and Katie Sevier, Seveier, because they were the ones that the other team was keying in on. And then they came up to the underclassmen to step up in that sectional final against Evansville Christian, and they pulled away for a 45-31 win. And I should have done this at the top, but apologize for any and all names that I am butchering. I am saying them with confidence and trying to make it seem like that. But I'm sure that as fans of the teams, you are probably pulling your hair out right now as Hadley Crosier, as I called her. Probably.
Oh, I could listen. It could be Crosier. I went with Crosier. One of us is right.
It's good. One of us split the difference. One of us has to be right? Probably.
She's good.
Not.
Hadley. She's good.
Hadley, yes. Hannah, yeah. That's right. All right, let's move on to Class 2A. Andrean is 12-14. They're taking on LaVille, 12-11. That's a 4 p.m. game. Andrean, looking at them, they're averaging 33 points a game. They've been kind of streaky this season, but they've won 6 of 7 coming into the regional, and the only loss was to Chesterton by 2. Their juniors, Maddie Walton and Lindsay Arcella, are both averaging around 11 a game. On the other side, LaVille is a similarly low-scoring team. They're at 32 a game. Brooke Edison's averaging around 11 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 steals. Josh and Courtney and Danny, too, I guess. I'm curious, this time of year, how much film study to do? Like, what do you do with the game plan? Like, how do you strike the balance, I suppose, between making sure the kids are prepared for specific things and risking overloading them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think like January is a great time to get ahead of your film work a little bit. Like, not saying that you're overlooking opponents, but you have a pretty good idea about who you're going to see in sectionals and regionals. So I'd say a lot of these coaches, they've already been doing a lot of things leading up to these games. It definitely makes it a lot easier that you only have to play 1 game now instead of 2 for the regional. I know, and I've said that on this podcast before, but we would bring boys in on Wednesday and Thursday, and we would have them run all of the opposing teams, like best sets, blobs, slobs, and then the better kids on your boys team would like emulate the players. Like, we wouldn't go as far as we would put jerseys with the number of the girl that they'd be guarding, and so you're definitely putting in the work this week. But Hank, kind of like you said too, like, you don't want to overdo it either, because you want the girls to feel unleashed in the game and not, paralysis by analysis where you're overthinking everything. So that's always something I think that coaches do is, yes, you want to be prepared, but at the same time, like, you want to turn them loose once the game starts.
I agree with Josh. I mean, the coaches have been out doing their scouts since in December, January, and putting those things into practice where they're putting the kids in situations. We always practice against boys as well. And then once it gets into this time of year, like, you as a coach, you have to be super prepared. You have to know sets that you want to run in certain situations, and you got to be able to pull those out and draw those up during a timeout, but you don't want to overload the players, like Josh said. Like, be prepared as a coach, and then you got to let the players play, and teams are going to make adjustments. They know that other teams have scouted them, so you have to kind of show up to the game day and be prepared as well as we know what are they actually running against us, what are they switching up, and making those adjustments in game, but giving that confidence to your team.
As players, do they go home? Do they study film on their own a lot during this time of year? Like, just trying to get their own little edges and things? Or is it just kind of like you just shut it out, listen to the coaches, and do your thing on Saturday?
I think it depends on the player. I was just shooting more shots, so I don't really know. Shoot more shots, do more ball handling, but I'm not for sure. I think that sometimes kids overwatch film and overthink things. So I'm a proponent of, like, be prepared, but don't, like, watch so much that you just become this, like, robot, or you just have watched too much film. So I'm kind of on the indifferent side on the film side.
Yeah, I think a lot of times too, like, what we would do is we would, like, create clips, So instead of like watching the entire game, which is like 90 minutes long, and you don't want your players watching all 90 minutes, like you would just pick maybe 5 or 6 clips of your matchup or this set or what have you. And then that way the girls, if they do watch on their own, it's only maybe for like 5-10 minutes tops. Because like you said, you don't want to overdo it.
I'll tell you, Hank, what a lot of I personally was watching a lot of motivational movies instead of, that was the film. Like Remember the Titans, Hoosiers, those Coach Carter, like those movies that are like just feel good, motivational, get you ready for the game. So that's the type of film that some players might be watching.
Were you ever underdogs, Courtney, going into the state tournament, or were you guys always kind of one of the 1-2 favorites?
We were underdogs. Out of the North, we were normally projected to come out of the North, but Heritage Christian they won 4 in a row, so they were the heavy favorite all those years.
Interesting. I swear I'm not like it. Well, I am kind of an ignoramus because I'm relatively new to the area, but yeah, no, it's good to get the underdog perspective too, or will be too, as we move on with some of these games. Courtney, also, I'll just shout out, if you need to bolt, just give me a shout and we'll.
Yeah, proponent of the multi-sport. I got to take my daughter to dance here in a little bit, but I think I got another 3 more minutes.
All right, cool. We'll talk about Lewis Caston. They're 21-3 against Fremont, which comes in at 16-8. Lewis Cass is led by Afton Griffin at 12 points a game, 3 steals. Kenzie Menon at 9 points and 8 rebounds a game and 2 blocks a game. And then Hedda Kosunen, who I'm assuming I think is another senior, 7 rebounds and 3 steals a game. On the Fremont side of things, they're coming in with a lot of momentum, man. Jalyn Parke had the game-winning 3 with 2.7 seconds left to beat Central Noble 41-38 on Saturday. And they have 2 freshmen leading the way in scoring with Maya Turner and Grace Schlerick. And here's a crazy thing about Fremont. They just have 1 senior on their roster and all 5 and none in the starting lineup. So they're a team that's going to be good for a while to come. Harrell has this as a 44-38 Cass win, but it feels kind of like a toss-up just looking at the numbers. And from the Fremont perspective, I suppose that youth can maybe come in handy in that sort of stage because, I feel like that kind of alleviates a little bit of it to a degree.
Yeah, it's like a 6-point spread, I guess it looks like, according to John Harrell. But getting back to the freshmen, like sometimes that's an advantage. Like, you don't know what you don't know. Like, just go out there and just play. I think sometimes, like, it could be too big of a moment for some of these kids. But like when you're a freshman, you're almost just like numb to the whole thing because you don't know any better, and you play well because you're loose. Yeah.
Courtney had to run to take her daughter to dance practice, but we soldier on. Lafayette Central Catholic 15-11 against Fort Wayne Luers, 16-6. Lafayette Central Catholic knocked off Carroll Flora, the number 4 team, I think it was in Class 2A at the time. And the thing that really stood out from that game was what they did defensively. We talked about it last week, but they held Allie Harness at 2,000-point score to like 14 or 15, and then they shut out her teammate entirely. So a really impressive defensive performance by LCC, a team that seems like they're always there. They're always just sort of hanging around. They're looking for their 3rd straight regional championship. They made it to state back in 2022. And then on the other side, Luers, as you may remember, they picked off Columbia City a few months ago during the regular season. Senior Addie Shank is averaging 14 a game and 8 rebounds. Miley Waring is at 11 points, 10 boards, and 2 blocks per game. And then rounding out their double-digit scores is Annika Davis at 10 points a game.
Yeah, Annika Davis can really play. She can be a college basketball player if she chooses to go that path. But to center in on Shank and Waring, we talked about Columbia City with just having kind of Molly Baker as the central presence in the post. This is something that's unique to any basketball team, let alone at the 2A level, to have 2 very good players that can occupy the paint and hurt you. In that game against Columbia City, Shank actually got in foul trouble. Waring goes to a single post look in a 4-out, 1-in kind of look, and really was able to hurt Columbia City. But I think Luers is unique. And I think when you ask around those parts and you ask around here, and people that really know 2A, this is a scary team. And this is a team that has the talent to win a state championship at 2A. 2A is chock full of a lot of talent. Mm-hmm. But Luers is one of those teams that can figure into the mix that when we redraw, if you don't have 2 post players or if you don't have Ruby White, for example, like Eastern Hancock does, this is a team that you might want to dodge.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned that the 2A, and that's interesting because getting into these teams now, Lapel and Eastern Hancock are the next two on the docket. That's a luxury that they do have, is the size factor there, and it'll be interesting. And Danny, I remember us talking about that, and you pointed out specifically with Luers, and just watch that game back at the moment, and just like, wow, that's a big team that's going to cause some problems, and here they are going for that regional championship.
Well, and Hank, didn't you say too that they beat Columbia City?
Yeah, they did in overtime in December.
And see, I think that's huge for confidence. Like when you go to a tournament like this, like a single elimination tournament, win or go home, and you're a 2A team, and you beat the wire to wire, basically, number one team in 4A, like you can draw on that experience, and in the moment won't be too big.
They average 35 rebounds a game as a team, and they're shooting 60% at the line. Fort Wayne Bishop Luers is. So that's a good outfit there. I couldn't find stats on Lafayette Central Catholic, but again, you can't overlook what they did defensively there in that sectional semifinal game on Friday night.
And all those teams that we're getting ready to talk about, like your Lapels, your Lintons, your Luers, your Eastbrooks, your Eastern Hancocks, like all those teams are separated by like 4 or 5 points. So I mean, we're talking 2 possession games, for a lot of these teams.
That's your winning pedigree. I mean, the theme. I think, Josh, on one of the episodes that we did while maybe you were in St. Louis, we talked about just winning pedigree. You had texted things like death taxes Julie Shelton, death taxes Rob Parker, death taxes Jeff Allen. It's also death taxes Lafayette Central Catholic. Like Hank's right. They're always there. They're going to have a great plan. So that one is very fascinating to me.
Yeah, it'll be a really interesting game to see how that one unfolds. Moving on now, Eastbrook 23-2 at Lapel 22-4. This is a rematch from.
Oh,
yeah,
we're frozen.
Right, no, your German team. Oh, sorry, Danny. Did I cut out?
No. Yeah, you cut out. So start on the Eastbrook Lapel. Start on that lineage again.
Man, I had such a great thing. It was just
you had a flow.
It was gonna. Oh yeah. So we were gonna win awards for it. I was so excited about it. Oh man, it wasn't just me reading off a Google document that I pulled up in front of me. But no, this is a rematch from last year's regional championship game that went down to the wire. A really good game last year. Eastbrook has a lot of seniors. Sophia Morrison's averaging 20 points a game, 3 assists, 3 steals. You have Olivia Howell at 13 a game. Audrey Prater at 9 points a game. Courtney Goff at 7 points a game. Esther McKim's coming in with 3 assists and 3 steals. And then you have a junior rounding up that group at 8 points and 6 rebounds a game. So you have a team that's experienced, and they're probably pretty salty about what happened last year going up against the Lapel team that we can talk about here in a second. But, Danny, I'll let you start us off here with Eastbrook.
Well, Josh, this is your team. Okay. This is going to be your team.
I got to get on the Eastbrook bandwagon here.
They attempted 519 threes.
Oh, I do. Okay? I do like this team.
Yes.
Oh my God.
They got a kid by the name of Sophia Morrison Josh, she has an absolute clip.
Okay.
She shot it 198 times from behind the line, and she's shooting 44%.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
I do love this team.
This is your team. And at 44% and 198 attempts, like you can say sentences like, this is one of the best 3-point shooters in the history of the state. Okay.
Yeah.
Like this kid can absolutely fill it. And by the way, Prater and Goff, who Hank had mentioned earlier, they each shot 130 attempts, and they shot 32 and 38% respectively.
My gosh. Like
this whole team is shooting, I think it's like 37% from the line. Now, the game that I watched was Eastbrook versus Norwell. And just a side note on like Norwell played a 1-3-1 against Eastbrook, and Sophia Morrison just, I mean, like I said, she has a clip. Okay. Mm-hmm. Like she was shooting free throws, but this is your team, man. Like okay. I just, when I was studying this, I was like, oh my God, did Josh Sable coach them?
I'm telling you, I'm going to have to watch this team now.
Yeah. You're gonna have to watch this team. This is they're fun. Yeah. I see that 2A regional score too. I mean, it's like,
yeah,
they're not going to have to, if they can catch fire, they're going to be a very tough out. I talked to somebody who was close to one of the 2A favorites, and they're like, this is the team that scares us.
Really?
Yeah.
Just from that ability to shoot the 3 ball.
Yeah. I mean, you got to know where everybody is.
And then, like you said, like you got Lapel, who, state runners up. So, they're hungry because they want to get back.
Yeah.
And I think it's a 1-point spread on John Harrell.
Is that all it is?
47-46.
Hey, this right now, based on all the games we've seen, like this might be the game so far.
And the thing too, you mentioned the 3-point shooting, and I'll spin it ahead now to Lapel, and we'll have some highlights here from their game against Hamilton Heights as well. But that was the thing in that game at the end, right before Christmas break, was Lapel's lack of communication and failing to close out on some of those 3-point shooters. And right on cue, you see Hammy Heights knock one down. So it'll be interesting to see how they grew, because that was really a point of emphasis. And obviously they're playing a lot better, because you're not going to get through that sectional Lapel's in if you're not.
Yeah.
But that'll be a big thing, because they had their 2 stars. They have Lanaya Wills at 19 points and 13 rebounds a game, and they have Maddie Pointer at 16 points and 3 assists. And they were both really important pieces of that state tournament team last year. But Lapel graduated a lot, and there were some growing pains, especially there at the end of December. I mean, Danny, we were both at the Eastern Hancock game. I went back the next week for the Hamilton Heights game. Both of them, Lapel rightfully thought they kind of let get away from them a little bit. Hamilton Heights would have been a tough one to win, same with Eastern Hancock, but there are a lot of mistakes down the stretch that they made that are characteristic of a team that's still learning. So it'll be interesting to see how they clean that up. But they're getting some different contributions. Annalise Stowe, I kept seeing her name pop up on Twitter during that sectional semifinals, the opening round. She's doing 7 points, 5 rebounds, and a couple steals per game. And they're shooting 66% at the line, Lapel is. So it kind of feels like a winning formula there when it gets to this point into the season. And they've been averaging around 50 points or so over their past 5 games and shooting over 40%. So it seems like Lapel's at least figured some things out offensively. It's just a matter of, again, what can they do defensively against that hot shoot 3-point team?
Yeah, and like you said, when you're young and you've graduated a lot of players off of the state runner-up team, like the defense is always going to be the thing that comes last. And like you said, a lot of that is just communication. A lot of that is knowing the scouting report and personnel and what we're trying to take away. But it looks like they've won their last 6 or 7 straight games. So I mean, they're probably they're coming into this hot at the right time, and like you said, they're going to have to get out on these shooters if they want to win this game.
Danny, do you have a Lapel thought?
They're still the chalk. I mean, it would be an upset if Eastbrook got them. And this is an unoriginal take when it comes to Lapel, but the winning pedigree, they were there last year, and just to come up short. But Wills and Pointer, when they play well, both of them, but when both of them play well at the same time, they are virtually impossible to beat. I mean, they could beat 4A teams. My takeaway from the Eastern Hancock Lapel game that I saw earlier was when Pointer got in foul trouble, what we saw Wills do, because Wills is not just a really good role player. She's somebody that you can play everything through. And that was 100 weeks ago. Like, she is so much better now. But the one thing that could give them problems, and Josh, you know this in coaching those Franklin teams, Lanaya Wills and Maddie Pointer, because they have length and they have wingspan, you don't have to necessarily chase, kids like Morrison off the line. Now you can just get in their vision and change their looks and just get them a little bit out of rhythm. So I think I think that their defensive prowess and their defensive length, I think, can bother Eastbrook enough. They just have to understand where Morrison and Prater and Goff are. And if they do, I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, and you're starting to see that a lot now, like in the NBA and even in the WNBA and even in college. Like, you want those 3 and D players that have length on the wing to contest those shooters. So like you said, like if Lapel's has length on the perimeter, that might slow down, Eastbrook's shooting for sure.
Moving on now to Eastern Hancock. Eastern Hancock, we've talked about quite a bit. They're a very senior-driven outfit with Kenzie Cook, the freshman who's been continuing to tear it up. They had no problem really going through their sectional, including the opener against Trenton Central on Friday night. On the other side, it's interesting. Parke Heritage is more of a junior-driven team. They have Emma Simpson averaging 20 points, 11 boards, 5 assists, and 4 steals a game, and she's a 46% shooter. And the reason why I say it's interesting in contrast is, like, Eastern Hancock, there's a feeling and a sense, I'm sure, around that program of like, this is our shot. This is our last chance. They got to the semi-state last year, came up short. Now it's all these seniors, Ruby White, Sammy Boulding, all these kids coming together, and it's sort of like their last go at it, their last run. On the other side, Parke Heritage, I don't know if they're arriving here early, but they're probably going to have another run at this thing with the group that they have. Obviously you don't want to waste chances, nothing like that. But in terms of pressure, mentality, and all that stuff, it feels like there's more pressure on Eastern Hancock, and probably a little bit more desperation when it comes down to it. It'll be interesting to see how that pressure and that energy is channeled by such a veteran team? Does it force them to clam up a little bit? Does it lead to them clamming up a little bit, or does it go the other way where they just come out and leave nothing to chance at all and get up early and run away with it?
Yeah, Emma Simpson for Parke Heritage is a 5'7" point guard, and she's hands down one of the most productive players in 2A. And Hank went through her numbers. She leads that entire team in every major statistical category. And I thought I read on Twitter that she actually led them to maybe Parke Heritage's first sectional title in girls basketball. So maybe there's some momentum to ride there. But if you look at what happened in 2A on the south side, so Eastern Hancock goes south. So they will actually dodge Luers, Lafayette, Central Catholic, and Lapel and all that. They actually go south. And if you look at what happened in the rest of 2A, some of the heavyweights are starting to fall. Like North Knox took out South Knox, and then North got caught in that trap that I talked about with Linton Stockton, and we'll talk about Linton Stockton because they're no pushover. But Hank had said that they feel like this is their year. I mean, that senior class with White, Bolding, and Willis, they just do seem laser focused. But to center in on Kenzie Cook, like Kyle in the Star, like he called her like the female version of Luke Brown. But she's, the kid's really starting to understand what it takes and what postseason basketball is all about. Triton Central jumped them. And I think they took 2 players and didn't guard them, and she couldn't get any sort of volume, but she turned into a playmaker. She turned into a passer. She has really kind of graduated to the I'll do whatever it takes for this team to win. But this is one of the most complete teams at 2A because of the senior class. But Brooklyn Willis is a kid that I'll transition from Cook to her because she was one of the kids that they left alone, that Triton Central left alone, and she hurt him from the 3-point line. So I really like Eastern Hancock. I really like the progression that I've seen because I've seen them at multiple times. I like that they get better every time I see them. But I also like that the individual players are starting to really fit into their roles. So Eastern Hancock, if you want to follow the 2A tournament, this is a nice horse to get behind.
Yeah, I mean, and it looks like they play the right way. They shoot 33% from 3. They only got 11 turnovers, which is pretty impressive considering you are playing through a freshman point guard. And obviously, I don't know their players or their coaching staff very well. I'm not there every day, but I definitely think it says a lot about these upperclassmen. Basically giving Kenzie Cook the keys to the bus, because I think a lot of times when you're a freshman coming in, sometimes the upperclassmen aren't real excited that you're there. It's like, hey, this is my time. We've paid our dues. Like you're going to have to wait. And it doesn't seem like that this upperclassmen group is that way. They've embraced her and they've trusted her to run the show. And now all they got to do is just play. And, that could be a very powerful thing when you are trusting your freshman point guard, and it might be one of those things where they might be able to ride this all the way to Gainbridge Fieldhouse.
And to tie it back into something we were talking about earlier, a lot of multi-sport kids, a lot of softball players, like Sammy Bowling's committed to go play at Toledo. I think Brooklyn Willis is a softball player too. Like they have some multi-sport athletes on there, and it's cool to see. And again, I think that counts for a lot. Like that'll be a thing with Chittard that we'll talk about here in a bit in Class 3A. But I mean, the multi-sport kids and an age of specialization really do set themselves apart just in terms of what they bring to the floor.
Well, I have a general thought. Like a lot of times you see teams in these smaller classes, and this is not an incrimination, but that if you have the best player in the sectional, you're getting out. Mm-hmm. Okay, so like an Emma Simpson or somebody like that, or a Jalyn Davidson, or just some of these really, really good players. I talked about Sophia Morrison, and it's really great to be able to shed light and to say their names in front of a microphone with hundreds of people that I know will listen to it, because those kids have earned that. But that's not Eastern Hancock. Eastern Hancock's a real basketball team that's complete. And you don't know if Ruby White's going to beat you or Sammy Bowling's going to beat you or Sherry Dowd is going to outcoach you. This is a complete team that I would suspect is going to be around for a minute.
The one loss this year for Eastern Hancock was to Lawrence North. And the fun fact,
it was close, right? It wasn't competitive for a little bit.
No,
that's my fault.
But it was the biggest school that they have ever played in program history. So they played Elkhart and Lawrence North on the same day for a Christmas holiday tournament. They beat Elkhart by 11, and then, like Josh said, they kept it close against Lawrence North, 71-39. So fighters chance. Sorry, but that was their one loss of the season, and it wasn't the toughest schedule in the world. But they went through this run of North Decatur, Cathedral, Lapel, and Knightstown to finish it all off a rivalry game, and they won them all. And they won them in impressive fashion. You beat Cathedral, a 4A team. You beat North Decatur in overtime. Then you go out and you beat Lapel in a game that Danny and I saw where they were able to control the ball and control themselves down the stretch. And then they finish it off against Knightstown, which kind of had that trap game feel to it, and they came away with a win there. So that was impressive. And like we said, I mean, if they're one of those teams to beat in 2A, but that field is just so loaded because on the South, it's probably gonna run through Linton Stockton before it's all said and done. Looking ahead now to Sheridan and Northeastern. Sheridan 19-5, Northeastern 19-6. I'll start with Northeastern. Addison Kirchers at 16 points a game and 4 steals a game. Addison Mastriano is at 13 points a game, 9 rebounds and 3 blocks a game. And then Ava Meichel is at 11 points a game, 5 assists and 4 steals. Sheridan, I got to see them at the beginning of the year against Carroll Flora. Kenzie Garner is a really fun player to watch, and she's averaging a double-double per year at 20 and 10. And she's also pouring in 5 assists and 4 steals and a couple blocks. Cecilia Tim, who I think missed last season due to injury, is back and healthy. She played soccer in the fall, is now playing basketball. She's at 10 points, 4 assists, 3 steals. And then Nova Cross, she's also helps out. But it seems like Sheridan's success this year is largely predicated on Garner and Cecilia.
Yeah, if you turn the Covenant Christian Sheridan sectional championship game on and you didn't have any built-in knowledge of who was who, I would suspect that you would lay eyes on Kenny Garner and immediately think like, wow, that kid looks different. Like she looks and moves and carries herself like a college basketball player. So you would first look at Kenzie's like physical attributes. Like she's 6 feet tall as a 2025, but she's got a mature kind of sturdy frame. But then you see that she's also very graceful. Like she plays point guard for him. She plays both ends of the floor. She can hit threes. She attacks off the bounce. In that game, she even caught a lob. It looked like a set that they run all the time, so that was probably nothing new to them. But I think she had 15 or 16 points in the first half, finished with like 25. But I should also add that like the reason why she looks like a college basketball player is because she is. Like she's going to Ferris State now. Before like Ferris State's in the GLIAC Division II, so before you make an unfair opinion of Kenzie Garner, like Ferris State's really good. Like they sit on top of the GLIAC right now. Their coach is a guy by the name of Kurt Westendorp. I first met him when he was the associate head coach at Valpo. But they're above Grand Valley State, which is some people in these parts call Grand Valley State like the Stanford of Division II.
They're out of Iowa, right?
Michigan, come on, man.
Yeah, Grand Rapids.
Michigan.
Yeah,
sorry, God, 71-31.
Yeah, no, I know, but Ferris State, like she can really play, and as she navigates this kind of postseason run, I do want it to kind of spotlight her name. And then to punctuate my description of Kenzie, and this is more personal than anything, one of the assistants is on Jalyn Bradshaw's staff at Sheridan is a guy by the name of Scott C. Wright. And that's Kenzie's grandfather. And Scott C. Wright and a guy by the name of Mark Tam, they used to run all of the training leagues out of, and now it's called Best Choice Fieldhouse in Fishers. And his daughter, Catherine C. Wright, who's now Catherine Gardner, she played Division I basketball at IPFW. So Kenzie Gardner also has like a genetic advantage. Like she comes from a bloodline that was at the pulse of like Northside girls basketball for like a dozen years. So if you're looking for somebody to watch, if you're from the area and you're like, hey, Sheridan is playing this weekend, that's the name to listen for when you turn that one on, because she's really, really good.
On the other side, Northeastern, 19-6, as we mentioned, they played a pretty good schedule. They played Jay County, who took Hamilton Heights down to the wire in their sectional championship game. They played Tri, which is a sectional finalist. I look here off the top of my head. And then they also played 4A East Central. And then Union City, we talked about at the top of the show, who's going to be playing for a regional championship here this weekend. So Northeastern's actually favored in that game. And then on the other side, Sheridan's looking to make history. I think it's their first ever regional championship, or first in a very long time for them. Looking ahead now, South Spencer 14-11, Brownstown Central 17-9. South Spencer, I'd just like to mention, has a fantastic logo with their mascot. It's just like this little cartoon guy, and I really enjoy it.
What is it?
I don't want to ruin it. They're the Rebels, so it's like just a little like Southern. Like I don't want to call him a hobo looking guy, but like one of those like I don't know, Johnny Appleseed types probably.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, there it
I'm
is.
with you.
Yeah,
Okay.
kind of looks like I can't Andy
All
the
right.
cartoons kind of guy. Yeah.
I
Anyway,
gotcha.
I really enjoyed it, and I thought about putting him in.
Yosemite Sam from Looney Tunes.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
wanted to. I almost thought about putting him in the viewer's guide just because the logo was so good, and I have an excuse to write about it. So instead, I'm going to talk about it. And then I'll also mention they have a really good freshman-senior combo with Molly Schultz at 16 points a game and 6 assists a game, and freshman Alexis Harris at 11 points a game. And then Kendall Strouds and Sally Shelton are also a couple to watch. Couldn't find out a ton about Brownstown Central in my research online, but they've played a tough schedule. They're a battle-tested group coming in at 17-9. If either of you have any thoughts on that, I'll let you have the floor. Otherwise, we can move on to our last big 2A game of the night.
Okay, sounds good.
Linton Stockton 19-6 versus North Decatur 18-6. Linton Stockton, of course, we'll start with them. They picked off North Knox in the sectional championship game. They played a stacked schedule. They have Brady Chambers, who put up 32 points in that championship game versus North Knox. She's up for Indy Star Player of the Week. They're one of those teams that it just seems like they're always around. They're always a contender in girls basketball.
Yeah, I know you guys were talking about this on the last pod, how, you just have teams that have that championship pedigree, whether it's B&L, Noblesville, Franklin, South Bend, Washington, Mount Vernon. I think you got to add Linton Stockton to that list. I mean, they've won 2 state titles in the last 5 years, I think it is. They're not afraid to travel. They've played Roncalli, Warren, Ben Davis. They beat the number 2 ranked team, right, in the sectional in North Knox. And, Jared Remmel can coach. I remember we had a holiday tournament at Franklin. This was before we played in the Hall of Fame Classic. And, they were up there. Zionsville was there. And they were really good. And I think the thing about Linton Stockton that I'm really impressed with is that they're not afraid to play people. I think a lot of times you see these records or you see these stats and you're like, oh, maybe they're a little bit inflated. Not Linton Stockton. They are fearless when it comes to, their schedule during the regular season. And I think that helps them, going into the tournament. It's kind of like in baseball when you're on the on-deck circle, you got the donut on, the bat's really, really heavy. That's the regular season. And then when you take that donut off and you go into hit, the bat feels light as a feather. And I think a lot of times that's an advantage for Linton Stockton.
So in club basketball, the state championship is played on a Saturday, and the Sunday after the state championship is kind of the unofficial start of club basketball. Some might say why are you starting the day after? But again, like I said on the last episode, 85% of the teams have been done for 3 weeks. So I actually look back. I mean, Linton Stockton they're like my South Horse now, because I think that win at North Knox is just so admirable. And from one coach to another, Jared. I just loved watching him coach, both in the state championship games in the past, but also that North Knox game. So I actually went back, and I am so embarrassed that I don't remember this. I actually exchanged messages with him literally after the day after the state championship a few years back. He was up in Indy, and we actually had a phone conversation. We talked basketball for an hour, and he discussed before he went back home that since he was already in Indy that he wanted to come to practice. And, he's humble. He's always trying to learn. I mean, he was a note taker, studies the games, and it showed. So Josh, in that North Knox game, and I don't know, I don't have a large body of work to say that if that was a special that he put in for that game, but that Georgetown double stack that you run as a delay game, he's running that stuff as a base offense.
Yeah. With
multiple options coming off of it. You have the slip, you have backdoor options on the backside. You can take strong side dribble penetration with the guard, but he's also really innovative with his dribble drive. So dribble drive normally has a player in each corner with one player in short corner to create gaps.
Right.
But what he does is he puts 3 players on one side of the floor, the strong side of the floor, to create a triple gap on the other side. And he's got the 2 guards, Chambers and Sherrills. They scored all but 1 point against North Knox. And these kids probably love playing for Jared because there's just triple gaps and they just get to go and just attack. But You don't go into North Knox and win that basketball game against the number one team in the state coming off of the South Knox game unless you're a good basketball team with great coaching.
Yeah,
and
100%.
So I just wanted to just shout Jared out because he might be, and I'm going to pause here before I say it, he might be the best coach south of Bedford. Like, he's really, really good.
He kind of reminds you of like Will Stahl and Stephen Thomas. Like, they're young, they're humble, they're hungry. They are always like trying to learn and grow. And those teams are very, very lucky to have coaches like Will and Stephen and Jared. Like it's like they are always just so humble and gracious when you talk to them, and they love their kids and they know the game. Really, really special young coaches.
And I also wanted to shout out North Knox too. That's a heck of a year. All year everybody was saying that's the best team in 2A. That's the best team in 2A. That's the best team in 2A. And one of the hardest things to do is win when you're the best team in 2A. And so I don't think they should take any shame, and no sun will come up stories are going to make them feel any better, but that they have a great player in Lexi Primus. She was a joy to watch all season on film. I thought they had a big senior class. They had high expectations, but North, everyone comes back to you in the end. Everyone's going to end up in that same back hallway crying and hugging their friends and family the same way that you were. I know you can't take solace in that, but you had a tremendous year. So congratulations.
Yeah, and like you said, brutal sectional. I mean, I know we talk about the Hamilton County sectional 8 and 4A, but I mean, this one right here is tough. Like you said, you got 3 quality basketball teams in there.
Yep.
The other side of that Linton-Stockton matchup is North Decatur. They come in 18-6. Ella Coons is averaging 14 points and 8 rebounds a game. Maddie Allen's having a great year, 14.7 rebounds, and then Kelsey Haley is at 3 assists. They breezed through their sectional, but as I mentioned there with Eastern Hancock, they took Eastern Hancock to overtime and lost by 2 in overtime back in December. So I mean, that's a dangerous team there in North Decatur. And
Doug Laker can coach now. Like he's old school. He's the coach at Greenwood, Greenfield Central. He coached Maddie Wise. I think she played at Iowa State for a little bit.
Iowa State and IUPUI. Now she's a college coach at Butler.
Right. And Doug can coach. And I know Linton's the favorite. I think they're favored by 10. But in a one-game regional, Doug will have his team ready to play. No question.
All it takes is one.
Yep.
As we move on now to Class 3A, Hanover Central 17-7 is taking on Bremen 14-11. Did I pronounce that right, or is it a long E? Bremen.
Listen, I teach social studies.
I would have gone Bremen. So it's one of us is going to be wrong there. I'd be happy to be wrong.
The school that starts with the letter B is taking on Hanover Central. Hanover Central averages 45 points a game, but they're balanced. You have Emmy Doty, Sienna Stilley. They're both around 9 points a game. Sienna Antwich is at 8 points a game. Gabby Camilla is at 3.5 steals a game. And then Skylar Ferry kind of rounds out that group. She's averaging 3 assists and 3 steals per game. And then on the other side, the B school, Keela Foster's at 18 points and 2 steals a game. Eliana Grubbs at 11 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. And then Emma Kincaid, 10 points, 2 steals per game. They beat Tippecanoe by 2 in overtime to get into regionals. And then on the other side, Hanover Central beat Highland by 3. So 2 teams coming off dramatic wins in their sectional final on Saturday, doing battle on this upcoming Saturday morning. Moving ahead now to New Prairie, 20-5 against Northwood, 19-6. New Prairie, they're led almost entirely by seniors. There's 3 of them, though, that I'm picking out to mention here. Jaden Flagg, Jolie Jones, and Morgan White. Jaden's averaging 14 points, 5 assists, 2 steals. Jolie's at 13 points, 6 rebounds, 2 steals. And then Morgan White, 12 points, 3 assists, and 3 steals. And then a couple players from Northwood, Claire Payne and Jocelyn Edwards, both at 10 points a game, with Claire Payne chipping a double-double there with 11 rebounds a game. Moving on now, we get back towards the central Indiana area. Hamilton Heights 23-2 taking on Woodlawn 18-8. Woodlawn is Taylor Knubler for them is at 14.7 rebounds. Alyssa Anderson is at 12 points and 11 rebounds. So a couple kids are averaging a double-double. And then Brooke Knubler is at 10 points, 4 assists, and 2 steals per game. On the other side of things, Hamilton Heights, we've talked about them before. I've seen them play a couple times this year. And it starts and it ends with Cameron Runner. She's averaging 27 points a game. She's shooting 52%, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 steals. And I talked to their coach after the game, after the Westfield win, and he was talking about how everybody on the team is bought into the same idea and an understanding of what it's going to take to win. And that's Cameron Runner. And it's making sure that she has the ball, helping put her in spots to be successful. She's taking advantage. They've all taken advantage, and they're all pulling in the same direction, even though it's one player clearly at the forefront there for the Huskies.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this a little bit with Eastern Hancock. Like, part of playing team basketball is you have to play to your strengths, and you have to know where scoring comes from. Like, no offense, but if you're shooting 20% from 3, like, play defense and set some screens. You know what I mean? Like don't turn it over. Like you have to know your strength as a team, and it definitely looks like Hamilton Heights, does that. But I'll tell you, I'm really impressed with this field. I mean, I think we have 9 of the top 12 teams remaining in 3A. I mean, these are some quality programs, and like you said, like Hamilton Heights, what can you say? Cam Runner, 27 points a game. But I think more impressive than that is they only turn it over 8 times a game. And that's better than Center Grove, who's averaging, 9 turnovers a game. So I think, like you said, like they have the recipe. Don't turn it over. Know where scoring comes from. In this case, Cam Runner. And, if you follow that formula, you're going to win a lot of games. And, they're not afraid to play people. Their strength of schedule is 46th. Their only losses were Noblesville and West Lafayette, and I could see them going pretty far in this 3A tournament for sure.
I think any take on Cameron Runner would be redundant. She's great. She's going to end up being an Indian All-Star, one of the best player probably in that school's history. Josh, I have a question for you though. Mm-hmm. When preparing for a team that's very runner centric like mm-hmm. Hamilton Heights is, your choices are A, I'm going to let Cameron get hers and nobody else is going to beat me and take away everybody else, or I'm going to take away and load up on runner because that's what they do best, and I'm not going to get beat with what you do best. And preparing for a game like that with a kid like Cameron, what's your individual coaching philosophy?
Yeah, so I saw this interview a long time ago with Bill Belichick, and obviously he's won 6 Super Bowls or whatever. And someone asked him, they were like, because he's a defensive-minded head coach, and someone asked him one time, they said, you played zone against the Steelers, and the next week you played man against Colts. Like, what are you doing defensively, or why did you do that? And they were talking about his system or his philosophy. And I'll never forget his quote. His quote was, "Our system is winning. So you have to take Cam Runner away. Like I'm not letting her touch the ball. Like I'm probably going to have someone in her face. I'm not going to let her catch it. I'm not going to let her touch it. And then I'll probably rotate some girls on her. And then I'll probably also have a girl that's on a non-shooter that's on Hamilton Heights zoning up the rim as well. I'm probably loading my help side. And I'm going to make life very, 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 very difficult. There's no way I'm going to let her beat me. Like if I'm Woodlawn, I know we're 26-point underdogs and we lose, okay, but we're not going to lose because Cam Runner, went for 30. It's not happening.
The thing with Hamilton Heights is there's other players too. Ella Hickok's averaging 10 a game, and she's also 4 assists, 3 steals. Then Katie Brown's at 9 points a game, and they're not afraid to slow it down. Speaking from experience, they are. I like Hamilton Heights. I love covering Cameron Runner. They're the poster child for why there should be a shot clock at times, because they'll pass it around and they will chew up as much clock as they can, but it works. And what's crazy is that they're really good defensively too. Like they caused some chaos. Like they gave up some open looks to Westfield. The Westfield couldn't connect on the last time that I saw them, but they still did a really good job of jarring some balls loose and forcing turnovers, and then hanging on down the stretch. And I mean, you give them a little bit of a lead, and they're perfectly content to sit on the ball there for a while and chew up clock. Moving up a little further north, you have Benton Central 25-3. They escaped what I think is a 3A sectional death over there at Twin Lakes. They're taking on Norwell 20-4. Norwell, obviously, we've talked about them before. Just a crazy tough schedule. I saw them against Fort Wayne Snyder. That was a game, Josh, maybe you're thinking of. They put up a good fight there against Snyder. One of those games that was closer.
Yeah.
The final score looked. They've also played the likes of Warsaw and Homestead and Columbia City.
Yeah.
LN, they lost to LN at the buzzer. They
Close.
played Valparaiso tough. Kennedy Felling and Mackenzie Feast are the two to know from them, but just a really well-rounded, talented team that's battle-tested. And I remember talking to their coach after the event in Noblesville, and he was talking about how, yeah, it's great to get this experience, and, the losses stink. And it's like, yeah, that's what I told him. And he said, yeah, the losses do stink. And it was just kind of like getting his players to continue buying in, because they're not going in there with the, okay, this is great, who cares what happens, we're getting better. They're going in there with the mentality of, we're going to win these games. And that can be unique for a team like that going into those situations.
Yeah, you can tell. Like when you look at Norwell's resume, it's very, very impressive. Like you said, they're fearless. They play Northridge, Homestead, LN, Fort Wayne Snyder, and they're the type of team, and you can tell that they're not the it was close, like we're 3A. Like I think the way that they approach it, like Eric Thornton, been there 27 years, 450 wins or whatever it is. Like you can tell that when they step on the floor, they expect to win. It doesn't matter if it's the number one team in 4A. And I think that's, a huge advantage for them going in is just their mindset.
Well, yeah, Feast and Felling can spin it, but you mentioned Coach Thornton. I mean, they do advanced stuff. Like Eastbrook was one of the games that I had screened, and what the tape showed is they're doing really advanced stuff against that 1-3-1 zone. Like they're not just throwing like long diagonal passes. Like they were throwing the long diagonal passes and having Hubble screen the back of the zone too. Like, dude, come on, man. Like that's advanced stuff, Josh. Like that is really, really difficult stuff to teach and to execute on the fly like that. But another thing, we talked to go back to Sophia Morrison and Eastbrook and their 500 and some threes or whatever they shot. Like they played 1-3-1 against them. Norwell did, which is their base defense and the identity of what they like to do. Now, Josh, you know this. If you have a team that shoots the three and a kid that shoots the three at 44% like Morrison, that's the last defense that you play.
Right.
So what you said is really smart. Like they're just going to be them. And their system is winning. Like they ran a defense that played right into Eastbrook's hands. And all due respect to Eastbrook, because I said how much that you and I are going to love them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they got wiped away in that game by like 30.
Yeah.
On the other side, you have Benton Central, like I said, coming out of a really difficult sectional. They're 25-3. They're also battle tested beyond all belief. They rallied to beat West Lafayette in that sectional championship game. Sarah Gick, and then some clutch buckets by Rachel Tolan and Sienna Foster helped them advance. But I mean, similar to Norwell, maybe not the same name grabbing 4A schools, but I mean, they play everybody in the Lafayette area. They go through that sectional, and they're going to be ready come Saturday afternoon as well.
Yeah, I mean, their coach, David Baxter, he's got 384 wins. I mean, so it's like you talk about two guys that have been doing it at a high level for a really, really long time.
Well, Andrean Tolan was on the West Lafayette side when Benton Central played West Lafayette in the sectional championship. But Hank mentioned Rachel Tolan. There was Caitlin Tolan. I think she might have been high school class of like 2012. And then they had a kid who was one of the first point guards that I ever worked with. I think she graduated in 2009. She verbally committed to go to Northwestern before she ended up at Valpo and is now a doctor. Her name was Skylar Gick, certainly a relation to Sarah Gick. This is a family affair up there. Like Sarah Gick, she's a 24. She's a senior. This is the Gick Tolan last opportunity to really try and get them to stay. Because I think if my memory serves me correctly, although they've had all these great Gicks and Denos and Tolans, I don't believe Benton has actually represented the North in the state championship. If you know, and I could be corrected on that. Someone from Benton Central, please tweet at me if I'm wrong on that. But Sarah Gick is a kid who is good enough to carry them through. She's a really good player.
Benton Central made it to the state championship game 2011 and 2019.
Twice. Thanks, Hank. I wasn't wrong once. I was wrong twice.
Sorry, Danny.
No. Hey, I asked for it, man.
It's better to be right, you know. And then regional championships in 19 and 20
Okay.
Benton Central. That's going to be a great game.
Yeah.
It's going to be a good game.
I was trying to like figure out how I would pick that, and honestly, like flip a coin and you probably come close. Probably have a better chance of getting it right than offering any legitimately research pick. Moving on now, Danville taking on Speedway. Speedway, I didn't realize it had been since 2011 that I think it was that Speedway had won a sectional championship.
Yeah, and real quick shout out to my guy, Joe Smith. He's the head coach at Speedway. And this might be a hot take, and Danny can back me up on this. Like, I feel like a lot of coaches in high-profile schools, they get a ton of credit because, we've won 1 million state championships or I've got like 1 million wins. But if you're coaching at a small school that doesn't win a lot or doesn't have that pedigree that we talk about, like I think people just kind of look at that situation and be like, oh, well, they don't have anybody or they can't coach or they're not this or not that. Trust me, there's a lot of coaches that coach at these small schools that are outstanding that don't get any credit. I mean, they do more with less. And Joe Smith is one of those guys, and he was at Covenant Christian. He won there. He's at Speedway. He won there. And let me tell you, like when you take over programs like that, it is slim pickings. And it's easy to get the keys of the kingdom and go win 1 million games. But like when you got to start from scratch and build it up like Joe Smith does, like in my opinion, he's definitely one of the the best coaches that nobody talks about.
At Covenant Christian, he led Covenant Christian to a sectional championship. He got him to semi-state. He got him to regional at Covenant Christian. So that's no small feat. And he has a 155 record at Speedway. They had a little 3-game losing streak this year, but that was against the likes of Brebeuf, Greenwood, and Pike. So they played a tough schedule early on. They played some teams throughout the year. Alex Delisle and Daniela Galvez are both averaging around 11 to 13 a game, 7 to 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals. Delisle, I think, is also up for Player of the Week this week. They're both having great years. And then on the other side, Danville, Emma Anslet is having a great junior season. She's at 15 points a game, 7 assists and 3 steals. Addie Davis, 13 points, 7 rebounds, 3 steals. And then Maddie Wethington is 10 points per game. Danville doesn't shoot a ton of threes, but they're really efficient at the line, shooting 67%. We saw them go toe-to-toe with another regional finalist from Class 4A in Plainfield. And Danville is just one of those teams, these programs, it's just been really, really steady here over the past few years.
Yeah, with that being said, Joe, if you hear this, you got your hands full on Saturday. You got your hands full on Saturday, buddy. Danville's good. Kaylee May is outstanding. I know we've talked a little bit about her on this show. She does a great job. She runs a great program. And Danville's always one of those teams in 3A. Every year, they're going to be a top 10 team. Every year. You might as well chalk it up like she's starting to create something really special there where year in, year out, they're producing really, really big-time players. They win a lot of games, and every year, they're showing up, deep tournament run, and they're fantastic. I think they're favored by 23, whatever it is, and I mean they've been doing this for a while now. Kaylee May's really, really good.
She is. Moving on now, so they got the lucky draw in terms of the regional. In that they avoided. It's more who you avoid than who you draw there, because they avoided both Indian Creek and Bishop Chatard. And it was kind of the question there that forced them, because if you have to pick your poison, you probably don't want to pick Danville, Indian Creek, or Bishop Chatard.
Yeah.
Indian Creek 21-4. I think all 4 losses were to 4A schools. Bishop Chatard 18-8. Third year in a row between these teams. It happened in 2022's regional. Chatard won last year. Indian Creek at semi-state semifinal. Neither of the game were really close, but looking at this and having seen both teams quite a bit this year, I think the rematch this year is going to be a lot closer. Daniel, I'll let you start the conversation.
Kasky and Wiseman, I'm not going to overthink or overanalyze this. That's what this is. And Wiseman is she playing 3A. There's only one logical punctuation to the end of her career, and that's a 3A state championship. The kid's got to be on a mission, and this is one of the biggest tests for her individually and Indian Creek as a team. But if you want to see a great 1v1 matchup, okay, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the great players that are on both rosters, because you don't win sectionals unless you're a great team. But Wiseman and Kasky, I'm turning it on for sure.
And not just Caskey either. Olivia Berzai, the sophomore, has been having a great year for
yes,
Chicago. Yeah,
great.
it's been and they're running both of them down there in the paint. And I mean, Faith's gonna have her hands full, but they're gonna have their hands full with her too. But Danny, I mean, you're exactly right. Like, it's just gonna be such a great game because it's not just them either, because the guard play is gonna be interesting too. Addie Duncan is just sort of a do-it-all player for Chittard, and then on Lauren Foster, it's kind of similar. If I can draw a comparison to Columbia City, where Kendra Sheets, the senior, is getting kind of overshadowed because of the schools that they're going to, but Kendra's an awesome player. In this case, I mean, Lauren Foster is an excellent player. She's been having a fantastic season, an excellent career. I mean, I think she should be in the Indiana All-Star conversation when the time comes, along with Faith. But you have those two going up against like an Addie Duncan for Chittard. You have her going up against Addie Duncan from Chittard. The one thing, though, that is working against Indian Creek, and I need to get an update on her, but Ayla Lawler, their sophomore, has been out since January 6th with an injury. Last I heard in talking to their coach, it sounds like they were hoping to get her back in time for the state tournament, so we'll see if she plays on Saturday. But that's a tough loss against a really balanced Chittard team that I've said it a bajillion times, but they don't score a lot, but they beat the snot out of you. And it helps to have that depth against a team like that.
Yeah, if you're Indian Creek, you're hoping that – when you have a Faith Wiseman as a sophomore and a Faith Wiseman and a Lauren Foster as sophomores, like as a coach, you're thinking about their junior and senior year. Like, okay, we got to get Brownsburg on the schedule. We got to get Westfield on the schedule. We got to get, obviously you're going to have Franklin and Center Grove, county schools. You got to get Columbia City on the schedule. Like this is why you schedule these teams. I mean, yes, you want to get Faith and Lauren some exposure, for Indiana All-Stars and for college and that sort of thing. But you're also thinking when we get to the tournament, when we get to these really tough games, you want to be able to say that we are ready for this level of physicality. We're ready for this level of coaching because we played all of these quality 4A teams. So you're hoping that this is where it pays off, is in these types of games.
Mm-hmm. And Dan Wagner would be very upset if I didn't mention this because he's brought up to me before. But I mean, Chittard's done the same thing with their schedule where they start the year, they go out and they play on the road at Scottsburg. They go out and they play in that event in Monticello where they open up against 4A Crown Point. And that's kind of a preview of what we'll see on Saturday with Caskey and Berzai versus Ava Zalkowski inside. And then they have the city tournament on top of that where they had to grind one out and win against Cathedral. And then they also had played Heritage Christian multiple times and Westfield. And then you get into sectional, they open against a good rebuff team and then close it out against Heritage Christian. So two really battle-tested teams here. Kind of feels like they're at the peak of their power right now and the championship window's open. It's just a matter of which one advances on Saturday. That'll be a really, really fun game.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at their schedule, it looks like they lost by 14 the last regular season game against Brebeuf, and then they turn around 4 days later and then they beat them by 14 points. So that's a great sign. If you're a coach, like, hey, we might be the underdogs, but we were underdogs 2 weeks ago and look what, or last week and look what happened.
I think I've asked you this before, Josh, about like how much you hold back when it comes, to those late season games and when you're facing them in sectional. I asked Dan that exact question, like what happened that last regular season game. And it was, we played a very vanilla game plan. I think they switched up their defense entirely. And then, they played it out on whatever night that was, Tuesday night, caught Brebeuf on an off shooting night and won. But that's a really good hard team. And like you said, I mean, to spin it around like that against a team that's going to be coming in confident is impressive.
Yeah. And you see that a lot, like, and I know we're doing the 4A show tomorrow, but I think that happened in some of the sectional championship games is the kind of veteran coaching staff that's been there, done that. They probably kept a lot of things close to the chest, and then when and then you use them when you need to in the big games, and it shows.
Last couple regional games coming up here. You have Washington 22-4 against Gibson Southern, also 22-4. That game's at 1 p.m. Washington has Katie Reed, Kenna Garland. Katie Reed's at 13 points a game, 6.3 rebounds. Shay Hawks, 8 points a game. They're shooting 46% as a team, 74% at the line. And then Gretchen Miles, their head coach, she was diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer back in September. She's the all-time winningest coach in program history. I really encourage everybody to check out Kyle Soklin, friend of the show. He wrote a great feature story about her a couple weeks ago. And then I saw on Twitter yesterday that it looks like Gretchen Miles, she finished up her last treatment on Monday morning. So that's pretty awesome. awesome news for her.
Yeah, I got to know Gretchen a couple years ago. We were at the Hall of Fame Classic dinner together. She's a fantastic person. She loves Washington, and more importantly, her players and her parents absolutely adore her. So definitely, thinking about you, Coach Miles, and I know your players are going to be playing their tails off for you this weekend.
On the other side, you have Gibson Southern coming in. Gabby Spink, the juniors, averaging 20 points, 6 assists, and 2 steals a game. Chloe Graham, 17 points, 2 assists, 2 steals. We've talked about them a decent amount here. And then 2 Paige Schnoss, who we talked about on Friday after her heroics in the sectional semifinal, 9.6 rebounds per game. She played one of her best games this season, as Kyle Soakland alluded to during the sectional. They're shooting 45% as a team and 35% from 3. So a couple of really efficient teams over there.
Yeah, Danny and I have talked about this a lot, and I think Courtney would agree as well. When you get to this stage of the tournament, you win with guards. Like front court players. Obviously, you have to have them. But when the ball is in Gabby Spink's hand or in Chloe Graham's hands, as a coach, I like my chances. I know Gabby really well. She actually was a Center Grove kid. Growing up, along with Faith Wiseman and Lauren Foster. Imagine if those 3 were playing for Center Grove right now. So I've known the family for a very, very long time. And Gabby's fantastic. I mean, not only is she averaging 20 points a game, but she also leading the team in assists as well. Chloe Graham shooting at 45% from 3. So when you have experienced guards that could get you a bucket and unstructured play, I think that's a huge advantage. I think it's going to be close because Washington also very, very skilled, very well coached. This is probably going to be one of the more competitive games on Saturday. But it'll be interesting to see if either of these teams I feel like can win it. But I give a slight edge towards Gibson Southern just because I think, like I said earlier, guards win games. And if depending on the draw moving forward, Gibson Southern can be one of these teams that can get to Gainbridge.
Well, when you have those communities like Washington plays in, you have these dragons that you have to slay. And Washington did slay their Vincennes dragon, and they talked about it in all of their post-game interviews. And I'll redundantly jump back to the name that Hank mentioned, Katie Reed. She's I think a 6'3" forward. She's not a household name yet, but she's gonna be. This kid is different, man. She's gonna be a Division I college basketball player. There's obviously her frame, 6'3", but she's kind of long. And Washington, there's a community that knows their long basketball players on the boys' side with the Zeller family. But one thing about Katie Reed is in her post-game interviews, she was telling stories about the 2022 Washington loss to Vincennes. She was in 8th. She wasn't even on the team. She was in 8th grade. So here's a kid who was born and bred to wear the black and gold. And she's talking about how they're not going to let it happen again to Vincennes. I think that's a really cool small town.
Great gym. Hank,
yes,
if you've never been, it's got to be on your bucket list, man. It is unbelievable.
Hatchet House, right?
Yeah, it's so good. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Katie Reed, Gabby Spink, that game's loaded. Yeah.
It's going to be an awesome game. Last one to bring us home, and one more with highlights. We have Greensburg versus Scottsburg. Both teams 21-4. Scottsburg won its first sectional title since 2012 with its 21st win of the season. That gives it the most since 1990, 6th most all-time in program history. They have Carrie Heiler, Ella Richardson, and Layla Powell in the they were led by them in the sectional final. And then Greensburg's also won 21 games, and they beat New Pal on January 23rd. They're here for the 4th time since 2018. Leah West, Miley Wilkinson, Allie Powers, and Claire Larison are all scoring in double figures for them. That'll be an interesting game down south to wrap things up. As we wrap things up on this show, they won't be the last game they play at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, Jason Simpson at Greensburg he's a fantastic coach. We played them when I was at Franklin, and Danny, you love him because he kind of sees the game the same way we do. He values shooting and decision making and making the extra pass, playing off 2 feet. His teams have great habits, and like you said, they're they're pretty young still. I mean, they got some sophomores. You know, the sophomores and the juniors are their best players. They're not afraid to play against top competition. You know, like Hank said, they've played against Franklin, Jennings, Zionsville, Warren Central, and you know, they are one of those teams that I think for the next couple of years, you know, you're going to expect them to see them, you know, making runs in the tournament. And they've been good for a long time. Like if you look at their history, they might have had a couple down years, but even going back to like 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, like they're always winning 20 games and making a run.
Yeah, Claire Larison that's the one kid I'll spotlight, and the reason why I chose her, because there's a lot of great players in this game, but we've talked a lot about 27s. I have talked a lot about 27s. Kenzie Cook, Lily Graves, you know, Riley Kane. I mean, just the list goes on and on and on. You can't mention that many impact 27s before you would get to Claire's name. She's been really good. She's been a big part of this run. And as I've done with all of these 27s, welcome to postseason basketball, because it hasn't gone so well for a lot of them, but for Claire it has.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, this officially sets the record, I think, for a single show at 1 hour and 30 minutes, because Danny and I split up our 2-hour extravaganza over 2 shows. So we set a record today. Congratulations to everybody who listened to the whole thing straight through and just didn't skip to a specific chapter. I think we hit successfully on every team in Class A, 2A, and 3A, which is no small feat. Tip of the cap to Danny for pulling out some of those names. Josh, always great, and Courtney with the analysis. We did it. We're going to do it all again tomorrow, Wednesday night, with the 4A preview. Do something similar. We'll deep dive on each matchup. And, yeah, we're just counting down the days to Saturday at this point. But for Josh, for Danny, for Courtney, who had to run and drop her daughter off at dance practice, I'm Brian Henson. We thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the 4A video.